I'll say instead. So I'll replace that adjective. Absolutely lovely to be here. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, shall we start with you, Jarno? Really quickly, who are you and what do you do and why are you so good at knowledge graphs?
Used to be a front-end developer, became a semantic SEO, which involved in becoming a structured data specialist. And nowadays I look at structured data at a whole larger picture within organizations and provide consultancy based on that.
Which is wonderful. And Teodora, writing a doctorate, I believe.
Yeah, I'm writing my PhD thesis. I'm a content writer, but I decided to dig deeper into what that communication on the web is.
Absolutely. I love that. Andrea, we know each other well. You're with WordLift.
Yep, yeah, I'm a co-founder of WordLift. We build a knowledge graph for SEO.
Brilliant stuff. Oh, and I'm Jason Barnard, the brand SERP guy at CaddyCube. I'm obsessed by brand SERPs, what appears when your audience Googles your brand name, which is where we're going to start, because that is my choice, is to say that my experience here is not so much in product knowledge graphs, which is terribly detailed, lots of things all fitting together into this massive marketing mess of muddly selling. I deal with the bigger picture, which is the brand or the person and what appears when you search for the brand's name. So I'm here to kind of drive the conversation forwards and try and drag as much information out of Teodora, Andy, and Jarno as I possibly can, so that I, like everybody watching, can learn about this specific aspect of knowledge graphs. So we're going to start off by saying, as we're going through this, I think we can look at it as saying that, Teodora, you're really into the theory, Andy's really into the marketing with the knowledge graph aspect, and Jarno's really into the geeky tech stuff and actually how to do all of this in a practical manner. Is that a fair assessment, you three?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I'm going to start with Teodora then. The theory, the overall overarching philosophical, doctoral, thesistical aspect of product knowledge graphs. How are you approaching this whole question?
Wow, thanks for the wonderful question that almost answers what you're asking. The theoretical part, quickly for everybody. Empowered yet distracted user. Overwhelmed marketing department who are thinking that digital marketing is something different from what they did. And and they don't think it's functionally or formally different. They just think they need to get all the marketing communications and translate them or publish them on the web. They don't understand the hypertextual nature of content first. Next, brands and organizations are very slowly realizing that they are not to sell on the web, but rather tell on the web. Another theory thread, the web of data. You can't ignore the web of data when you're doing marketing communications. When you're connecting to the other through the web, you need these vehicles, or you need to dress that content into interoperable, meaning data that can be read by different devices and exchanged by different devices. So you need your content and your thinking to be informed by this giant web of data. A giant global graph is what Tim Berners-Lee calls it.
Right. Okay. So the internet is a giant web of data. I mean, Andy, I know you build internal knowledge graphs. I mean, it's difficult enough getting your head around the idea that the web is all this interconnected data. But even within our organizations, we do a really bad job of actually having any representation in terms of data of our inventory or our content or anything else.
I think that, yeah, the challenge of the knowledge graph is the challenge of representing reality And that's very difficult when you deal with your own identity, and it gets even more difficult when you start looking at the products that you have that you want to talk about. As Teodora say, we don't use the word sale, but so building a knowledge graph is challenging in a way because it's a form of communication between the humans and the machines that kind of help us get through, the digital journey. So we need to build knowledge graph in order to let AI system and machine learning and deep learning understand, what we're doing and what we care about. And that's really, for me, the most important concept of a knowledge graph. It's like the connecting dot between the human and the machine.
Right, yeah, I mean, because we're basically saying we're asking the machine to represent us to its audience or its users. And if we want to have any chance of it representing us in a way that we would wish to be represented, we have to communicate properly. And machines understand knowledge graphs incredibly easily. They don't understand unstructured data. Jarno, I'm sure you can take that to another level.
For me, structured data, or even more the process of structuring your data, is simply a vehicle for getting things done. In my positions over the years, I've barely ever mentioned the word knowledge graph within any organization I worked for. I simply started out pointing the multiple points of failure within marketing systems or within products. So once you start showing organizations where things go wrong and where there's missing information and how different departments can start to enrich each other, you not necessarily need to talk about knowledge graph. You directly start to talk about business impact. And so that's most of the time my entry point to knowledge graphs isn't so much the concept of a knowledge graph as simply using the existence of it as a method to connect different areas within an organization or their marketing departments or their product pages or whatever it is. So for me, it's more practice than theory.
That's absolutely delightful. I like that. So, I also like, well, I don't like the idea. We all have this terrible problem of all these different departments with their big stack of data, which is badly organized, and they don't share it. And potentially a knowledge graph internally is a great way to share knowledge. And what I don't think we realize necessarily, and Teodora, this goes to you, is it goes beyond just products. It's only product, content marketing, SEO, SEA, and even the offline. And if we can bring all that data together and get everybody showing from the same pool of data, we're winning on every front. Teodora, please expand on that, theoretically speaking.
Yeah, winning on every front, data. What I thought while I was listening to you is, again, getting back to theory, that mindset of webbiness. No matter how many pieces of content you create, like 7 ways to use your refrigerator, it doesn't matter. You're wasting money if you're doing content marketing. You need, as Jarno said, to get your data right, to have that impact. You need to understand that marketing communications people need to understand that next to content is that idea of publishing data. And this will bring the departments, the creativity and the illogical part of thinking about SEO when you are discussing the package of your good. How are you going to engage the person in the supermarket? How are you going to get them from the physical reality and WOPs, direct them to your knowledge graph? Isn't that exciting? I'm getting goosebumps. I guess it's so easy.
Yeah, I mean, and that is the same kind of, as soon as you start thinking, I'm not publishing content, I'm publishing data, and I need to link that data, or that data needs to have been linked to something else. I mean, Andrea, I think personally, as a human being, I find it really difficult. I start writing a piece of content and it's not the first thing in my mind. This is part of a bigger set of data that all needs to be interconnected.
I don't know. I always look at the perspective of the human and then the perspective of the machine. So the perspective of the human, if we look at the consumer, is that we want to see things all together. So when we look at a product, we don't just look at the product page. We take a long journey, and this long journey goes maybe even through the 7 details of the refrigerator. But it's just one step. And there are multiple facets that the human will consider even before spending time on looking for a product. And in marketing, we then have this very narrow view where we then say, hey, that's the product page, this is how it should look. But in reality, things are way more complex. And the same it applies to the machine, because if you have to write a crawler, or if you have to build a knowledge graph from the things that have been published, then you want to collect these different data sets, and you want to have maybe a feed which is structured, which can be something similar to the merchant feed, but then you also want to see what people are writing on the web in natural language, and then you want to read structured data from these web pages, so that then you can consolidate all this information and store it inside your knowledge graph. So I always see that we have to look at these two perspectives: the humans that it's consuming the data, and then the robots that are using this data to create this representation, and the system that we use every day. I mean, a recommendation system requires this information. An email marketing platform requires this information. So everyone kind of needs this collection of data.
But I mean, Jarno, right now, I heard kind of the product feed idea. Most companies that I have heard of, obviously I deal with smaller companies than you do, they're thinking, oh, product feed, I've got to start organizing my data. What a bore and how horrible. And that's unfortunate.
Yes and no. When you first start doing it, it's not fun, because you don't know what to expect, what the outcome is going to be of your efforts, and you really need to put in some serious efforts, even if it's for something that most companies do, like setting up Google Merchant Center feeds. That's a pretty common thing to do, but getting your data set in order, that's often torturous experience for a lot of companies. The interesting part is once you've done a good job, is look at the possibilities you created for yourself. The downside of doing that is that most companies do these efforts in separate silos. So today they decide to start working on Google Merchant Center. Tomorrow they decide to do something on Facebook. And the issue often lies already in the early stages of businesses, when they're still a small company and they're just trying to build up their business. And it's already at that point where companies make bad or mal-informed decisions. And one of the things small companies really have to be aware of is, once you start to push into new areas for your marketing, make sure you take the time to already make inventory of the type of information you're going to be needing to do that, and hold that information to any other effort you're going to be doing. Because by comparing different marketing outlet channels, you actually can start make a good inventory for your future product knowledge graph, as in regards to which values do I actually need for all my products to be able to do email marketing, to be able to do AdWords. So it's not just a thing for big companies, it's a thing for big companies. It's because they didn't look at it when they were still a small company. So the earlier start inventorizing your data warehouse, so to say, your data needs, and the better you organize that, the easier it becomes to grow. Because then you're starting to plug in additional information, as opposed to creating separate data sets for every outlet there is.
Yeah, I mean, once you've got all your little data sets and they're all separate and fragmented, it's incredibly difficult to bring it all together, especially when it's siloed down. Teodora, that's a big problem, is, as you said, Jarno, companies tend to do things in little chunks, with different people who are owning that particular little chunk, with all different ways of thinking. The advantages of centralizing it are obvious, but the practicalities are incredibly difficult. Teodora, that was it was an open-ended question that wasn't really a question, and I do apologize.
Yes. I was thinking about, maybe it touches your open-ended question. That idea of bringing everything together and understanding your business, that's the very heart of relationship marketing and of building relationships. Why? Because it's a knowledge-intensive business. It's a knowledge-intensive activity to engage meaningfully with people. Also, you need a business needs to be able to talk within itself. What Jarno is talking about is also, for me, valid within the business. That is, you have internal audiences. So you have algorithmic audiences, you have external audiences, and you have internal audiences. The people who are writing the content or are doing the things, they need that knowledge base. They need knowledge. So again, keyword, knowledge intensive, knowledge as an edge.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the question of being consistent across your brand, but also your products. I mean, I'm obsessed by brand. Building Kalicube Pro, which is a platform for basically making your brand message consistent across the web. I realized that most companies, including my own and myself, are a long way from being consistent, however consistent we think we are. And when you take that at a brand level, I'm looking at it and thinking, aren't we all foolish? And aren't we all rubbish? But it is different departments. Even in my company, where there's only 2 people, 2 different departments, 2 different approaches, 2 different ways of saying things. And then you multiply that by 7 or 8, 10, 15, 20 departments and 5,000 products, or even 100 products, as you said, Jarno, for a small company. It's a phenomenal problem that knowledge graphs solve, Andy.
Well, I mean, you create a really this scale. I like a lot Jarno's example that you have to start small, because I mean, in a small organization, you still kind of organize stuff, and everyone struggled with putting effort in managing metadata, because it's, in the beginning it's not exciting. I agree, but then the degrees of application of this work are so huge that, even if you just run email marketing and ads, or even if you just do SEO and ads, then you see the advantages that kind of scale. So it's one of these things where you put effort and then you get a lot of value. The big problem is that this value is previously unknown. It's very hard to kind of estimate, what are we gonna get from these data quality improvement effort that we're gonna make, and that's hard, because it highly kind of depends on the type of data that you're managing and the level of competition. I mean, I was running today these analysis on a decent kind of a decent size retail shop in New Zealand, and I was looking at an increase in organic clicks by 16% by improving the data quality on their product pages. So, but if you look at it, it's kind of a minimal impact compared to what you can do now that you have better data for this product, because I mean, it can help you organize the logistics in a different way. It can help you create a better recommendation system for your email marketing campaign. So it's really a gold mine, but it's very hard to kind of estimate these. I think we have a question from Jenny Hill. How do you help business see the big picture? How do you sell it to the boss? I was going to be my next question. Thank you, Jeannie. You're a genius. Jeannie the genius. Go on, yes. Andy. I'm sure you've got an answer. I was asking Jarno to take this.
Sorry, Jarno.
Well, starters, don't expect you'll hit home run every time you're intending to sell such projects. Whether you're a consultant or an internal employee, it doesn't matter. You'll never get a 100% success rate. Accept that. Coming from my position, where I normally start to build working on these things within the organization, I quickly make an inventory of what type of data outlets are there. Which marketing channels do we need to optimize? Which marketing channels don't we use? So looking at it from a wider perspective and simply as on marketing, you can easily recognize if there are possibilities in better, let's say it, advertisement or better targeting on Facebook or email outreach. So make an inventory of where the opportunities lie and make sure to sell one of them to the big boss.
Yeah, one addition.
Exactly. Make an inventory and see where you think you can make the biggest impact, and start with selling that single side project.
Yeah.
As you start building up successes, it becomes more easy to start telling the bigger picture, because if you're just doing it based on your ad system, it's a small case to sell. But once you start involve email marketing and you start to involve content creation, and you actually start to show within the business case by case that you're improving numbers, whatever the metrics are, then you slowly start to work towards the bigger picture. Don't try to sell the bigger picture immediately. You'll lose the middle one.
Selling the bigger picture is always the wrong. I mean, I've done it, huh? So it's like a mistake that I've done many times to, look at the big picture but then in reality, yes, we have to start small and we have to kind of target a specific project. Now, in my case, of course, today I would look at SEO opportunity first, because that's easy to measure and kind of SEO in e-commerce. I mean, Jarno, maybe you know more about it, but it looks to me that SEO wasn't kind of designed for e-commerce, because e-commerce was so highly dependent on advertisement on Google, and therefore it was less interesting as an opportunity. Whether today I see this as kind of an area of expansion, because Google is providing more visibility to natural listing. So
with the current state of things in Schema.org, by now we actually have sufficient vocabulary to build a complete CMS on. It's actually all the data is there and all the formats are there to build the new Magento or to build the new Wix or whatever platform you want to build. There's actually structured data for that. Why is that nice? Is because those Schema.org types and properties are based on input from different areas in the world and different standards. So it's been influenced by good relations vocabulary, which forms the foundation for the product side of things in Schema.org. But with the latest efforts is also involvement of Google Merchant Center and translating all their specifications to Schema.org. And then we also have GS1 vocabulary, which takes you a level deeper for people like manufacturers or wholesalers. So from that point of view, quick win always is SEO. Get those star ratings, get those prices shown in a search. But that's the low-hanging fruit. That's the easy stuff.
Yep.
Second easy one is always go sit down with the people that do the ads. Go look at the numbers with them. Go do your keywords research with them. And try to discover which areas you're not doing well or you haven't exposed yet. Because most of the time when people doing ads run into issues, I can't go into this product group or I can't make ads for this, is because the system itself on the website isn't able to filter or slice and dice for the things they want to advertise for. For example, green sneakers size 38. If your web page can't slice on those filters, you can't also create ads for them. So that's one of the things I always look at. Okay, are there certain types of information we need so we can expand on AdWords?
But then e-commerce companies and sites are faced with the phenomenal problem is that all of these platforms have been built differently and don't use the standardized schema, which means that you're trying to kind of shoehorn a round peg into a square hole or vice versa.
Yep.
Okay, so what do we do? What do we do, Jarno?
Again, baby steps. You first start to look at things. Okay, which is the most important channel right now? Is that channel performing well? No, let's make the advantage there. Because if you take the biggest revenue generator and turn a higher revenue on that, then you also get more resources allocated to start expanding on the data set you built for that outlet. Don't create a second outlet. Start expanding on the data set you already built. And that's actually the key change people have to make. Stop making separate data sets for everything. From the start off, from the first feed you're building, make sure they all pull from the same data set. And that's where you'll make the real advantage. That's where you'll make the big step and save millions in the end.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me, I'm interrupting, but that's a great quote, and I really want to kind of focus on that, is stop making multiple data sets for the same thing. And Andy, one thing I was thinking about is what you guys do at WordLift, which is start with a small chunk, which is manageable, i.e. one section of your catalog, and do that, prove that it's going to make you more money, then move on to the rest, which A, gives you a manageable chunk, and B, gives you that first proof of concept. Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, also, I mean, the linked data infrastructure that we use, it helps us because we create these unique identifiers for each item. So having these nodes as identifiers allow us to kind of keep track of the same product across different outlets or different pages, because we know that in the end it's always that same entity that has been described in that video, has been presented in that FAQ, has been blogged about, and it's presented at last in that product page. And now this is why we're looking at omni-channel as a new area of expansion, because of course in the physical world we also need the same data. And working with Teodora, we realized that these omni-channel challenges that the e-commerce is not ready for handling, the physical consumer, and on the other side, the people at the point of sale kind of lack the same data that the e-commerce website would have. And so there is also kind of a need of bridging, these other gaps between, digital and physical. And it became so important now because of the pandemic for so many businesses that they have to transition quickly to digital, but at the same time keeping kind of the retail experience active and what it all becomes. I mean, they've been kind of analyzed and tracked and optimized as separate revenue streams, but right now it's pretty much converging.
Yeah, no, the offline and online is something I think traditionally over the last 20 years we've done incredibly badly as a online community.
It's crazy, huh? Yeah,
it's crazy, but yeah, sorry, and the pandemic has actually made everybody kind of sit up and think, actually, I'm going to start dealing with this. The online and the offline are not different things. They're not different environments. It's the people who are offline who are actually buying online. And as you said, Andy, they're seeing multiple aspects of your product before they buy it, some of which are offline, some of which are online. And when it's not consistent, you're making a big mistake. Teodora, you were leaning forward to say something.
No, I was leaning forward to write a note, which I thought, like, if the question is, because it looks like it boils down to how motivated a business is to talk to its customers. And then the question is, do you want to sell more by push communications, or you want to talk and serve more by creating an environment ready for pull communications? This is where the people pull information. And the other thing is where you push information. And I know that this is not the mainstream idea of marketing, but on the web, I believe this is the way forward.
Completely agree.
That's why I leaned forward.
Right, but which is kind of ironic, because I remember back in the day in '98, you would click on links, and the idea is you would end up down this rabbit hole of just clicking on things you thought were interesting, which is terribly pull. And Google and other platforms are going increasingly push, which is contradictory to what you just said, and probably contradictory to human nature and what we're all actually looking for. Can anybody expand on that silly idea?
On the practical side, if I may, how I see this translate within businesses is businesses tend to, when creating strategies, businesses tend to have an inward view of things. Yeah. They're looking at their needs and what they want and what they need of their customers. Actually, don't even see them as customers. They see them as resources. And that's the nice thing of building connected marketing and actually care about the story you're telling, and is you're reversing that process. your big selling point is not you are there for us. No, we are here for you. And as vague as it sounds when we're talking about using structured data, knowledge graph, and semantic information for that, there is literally a whole practical side you can implement, which goes beyond the theory, but actually completely undescribes what the theory is saying about these technologies.
The one thing that just struck me is it's kind of ironic that we're saying, oh, we're going to use knowledge graphs to actually think more about the customer and less about ourselves. But would it be fair to say that the knowledge graph actually then extends out, because the knowledge graph is just entities with relationships and attributes, that relationship idea is actually terribly useful for marketing, because the customer then becomes a relationship to our knowledge graph through our products?
In the multi-touch marketing world, where attribution becomes more difficult every single day, it starts to become so important that everything unites together in the way a business expresses themselves or sells their product or whatever they do online. You have to have an homogeneous, how do I pronounce that word? a single form of communicating who you are, what you do, what you're selling, why you do what you're doing. And for that, you need to be able to connect the dots within your organization. But that means you have to look outward and see what the outside wants to have of you, as opposed to only thinking about what it is you as a business need.
Yeah, I mean, as human beings, we're all the star of our own film, and we carry that over into our businesses, all terribly egocentrical. Egocentric, I'm adding extra syllables just for the fun of it. Just a really quick point, Andy, if there are any questions, do interrupt me, because I don't have access to the chat window.
Yeah. I think, we're monitoring. No questions so far.
Oh, we do have one, but from Teodora. Please, can you type it into the chat?
Answer. I have an answer to a question that is not posed yet. I just wanted to say that there is this super thick thread between knowledge graphs and marketing communications, and it's super hard to argument that in an academic environment, although I bang my head and continue doing it. But the relationship is, look at this, relationships, meaning, knowledge. So this is the answer to an unknown question.
It's the answer to a question nobody asked, but it actually fits in with everything else that we're talking about, and that kind of whole philosophical aspect. Now, one thing, Jarno, you mentioned earlier on was the GS1, which I know you're really keen on, because you got this idea of saying we need unique identifiers, because these different data sets mean that we've got lots of different identifiers that are different in each department, and products end up getting mixed up, maybe. And the GS1 is your super favorite solution to that problem.
Well, I didn't imagine GS1. It's around for, was it 70 years already, I believe?
All right.
Or even.
Yeah.
I've been asleep under a rock then. All right, fair enough.
So the GS1 is the global organization that provides G10 numbers, practical terms, barcodes, and things like that. Right. So they make sure that every product out there on the market that, for example, gets sold in a supermarket can actually be scanned by systems, because there's a unique barcode on that product. So they've been providing unique identifiers for products long before the internet existed, thus making retail possible. Online, I know from projects in the past that issues companies like eBay and Amazon had is that they had enormous data sets without unique identifiers. So that, for example, things like kitchen utensils could lead to, well, let's say 70,000 roughly unique products, which actually aren't unique products, where we're separate G10 numbers and variants of one product group. But because those companies didn't have unique identifiers to extract that information, you ended up looking for table utensils in one of those systems, and you could scroll until you died of old age, and you still would be seeing the same table utensils. So those unique identifiers allows you to coagulate a lot, and not coagulate, merge all your different products into actually the products you have. which isn't so much an issue for most of web stores, but it's an issue for organizations like marketplaces, auction websites, and organizations like that. They need to make sense of all those different feeds they're getting and all those products they're getting into their systems. And that's where GTIN numbers greatly help you identify which product belongs to which product and which products are variants from each other. So that's why I'm quite crazy from that point of view about the GS1. And next to that, GS1 has its own vocabulary, which, don't let me sell it short, it's not an extension of schema.org, but it certainly has taken schema.org into account while they designed their vocabulary. And they've taken it a few steps further, and by now things of that vocabulary are starting to drip back into schema.org and actually taking each other into account all the time.
So sorry, go ahead, Nandi.
I have a question for Jarno. I mean, would you suggest to use the GS1 product vocabulary today in conjunction with schema, or would you rather prefer to wait schema to kind of adopt some of these new terms? I mean, one thing that I like about GS1 product vocabulary is that it starts taking into account things like sustainability, which currently, I mean, we don't consider much, but it will become more and more important, especially as we get into, selling the physical products and kind of creating a unified experience. What would you suggest to these?
Most of the time when I pull in GS1 vocabulary is when I have data design issues. So for example, practical issue, a website wants to have more faceted filtering on their category page, but they're not able to offer more simply because they don't have all the types, properties, and values they need to expand on their categorization and create filters for those. The nice thing of the GS1 vocabulary, it goes into depth around a lot of properties of different product groups and types. Why is that interesting? Because often these also represent the facets you want to disclose in your category pages. Now, of course, if you are deeply committed to a certain type of CMS and the way it operates, then you'll start extending on that. But still, you need to know which properties and values do I need to be able to create that filtering. And that's where you look at the GS1 vocabulary and say, okay, here I have a food product. What types and properties are there for properties and values are there for a food product, which I can, for example, use to create more filtering on my website. So by looking at the GS1 vocabulary as a method to expand your own data set and create new possibilities within your organization, because you use it for that purpose, also using it to generate the markup, that's the added bonus, because you already took the base design. So then because you have that information, it starts to become pretty trivial to actually start publishing that information. Now, whether or not search engines are looking for that information is a different discussion. Jury's still out on that one. But when you go to that type of advanced level, most of the time you start publishing that information not so much for SEO purposes as more for analytical and business intelligence purposes. So it actually can extend your pool of information. Again, you can get information and knowledge from data, like Teodora said. And so that can help your business grow and grow insights. And again, that doesn't have to be one gigantic project in one go. You can do baby steps. You start with pushing analytical information based on the schema markup you already have. That's a quite trivial job nowadays. And then you can start expanding.
Jason is muted, but
I'm not hearing you, Jason.
Sorry, I've got people banging away next door, banging nails into the wall. I was trying to save everybody's ears. No, I was just thinking kind of a lot of us and marketers and businesses tend to think, oh, Google wants it and I'll do it because I might make some extra money, get some extra traffic. And in fact, that kind of internal business logic of saying I need to build an internal knowledge graph, whatever Google chooses to do, is phenomenally powerful. And bringing Jeannie Hill has insisted on the fact that we repeat, you will save millions in the end. What an amazing tip, and what a great way to convince people to actually start. But I agree. Whatever the disadvantages today, starting to build today means that you're going to be more efficient and more effective in the future. And that will, I mean, on my level, save thousands, but on a bigger level would save millions, which is really incredibly exciting. And I didn't realize GS1 was quite that granular.
Yeah, one of the reasons it is that granular is a lot of the GS1 vocabulary is used to exchange data between manufacturers. And manufacturers need to have that tiny, gritty detail level to be able to do what they do. So it's from that point of view, it's for a different need and for a completely different purpose, or finds its origin.
Right. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
We got a question for Jason. I think how important are knowledge graph panels for direct to consumer brands, and is it correct that getting a knowledge panel it kind of depend on the popularity of the brand, or how much it does depend on the structured data? I mean, this is Jason, your bread and butter. Huh?
It is my bread and butter, and there are multiple questions there, and I could easily talk for an hour about this all on my own and not shut up. So cut me off if I do go on. But number one, wiki isn't necessary. I think that's kind of something, a dangerous mistake people are making, is A, polluting the wiki world, and B, thinking that's the only way in. What I'm seeing is that Google has multiple verticals with multiple knowledge graphs, all of which have knowledge graph IDs attributed to them. So Google Maps has one, Google Books has one, Google Podcasts appears to have one, Google Scholars, obviously. And also the web index has a knowledge graph with knowledge graph IDs attributed to certain entities within it, images too. And what I'm looking at here is Google is porting all of these little by little into the main knowledge graph. So actually, that's a great trick. Those are great. If you're in a vertical and you're sufficiently well understood within that vertical, it's actually relatively easy. I mean, I don't say it's fast. It's easy, simple process, takes a lot of work, and it's not fast, but you can actually port things across. I ported my sister, which is a bit weird, from Google Books into the main knowledge graph. And it was pretty easy. And it didn't require a wiki page, and it just required providing the information, getting an entity home, which is vastly underrated as a lever to do this. Make sure Google understands where it should be looking for the information from the horse's mouth. Then going and corroborating it so that Google can say, I am confident enough to put this in the main knowledge graph, and I know I'm not going to be polluting the main knowledge graph with rubbish information. So that's number two. And number three is the popularity of the brand. That's a question I get asked all the time. Wikipedia, Wikidata rely on notability guidelines because they don't want everybody and anybody in there who aren't actually interesting to people, human beings, or worthy, in inverted commas, of a place. Google doesn't care. It just wants to understand. So the idea of notability within the context of Google's knowledge graph is not a concept you need to worry about. Google simply wants to understand everything and everybody in the world, so everybody can be in the knowledge graph. After that, do you get a knowledge panel is a whole different question, which is based on confidence, geolocation, and the probability that the person who's made the search is actually looking for that brand. Then you move into the idea of, if you have an ambiguous brand name, that ambiguity immediately becomes much higher. If there are multiple brands within the same region or multiple people within the same region, Google will tend to go with the more popular one because it's more probable. So I've answered several questions really quickly. If anyone wants to learn more about that, just ping me and contact me. Thank you, cool. Andy, for the question. I loved it. But actually, Jeannie was asking a question about pool, which is Teodora.
Yes, that's for Teodora.
Oh, go on. Off you go, Andy. I'll let you.
Yeah. Jenny is asking to Teodora if you know, working on data and making data more clean. It's creating, you know, the push, and so it kind of letting marketer focus on the human relation pool, because the push is done by the data or the clean data. Is that correct?
It is, if you are not a firm believer of only pull, which I am on the web. I understand what Johnny says, but this is not what I meant. I meant something radically different. And it will be translating analog days marketing into digital, literally, if we use a knowledge graph for pushing ads. I know this is not what I'm supposed to say, maybe, but this brings me to something I wanted to mention, and it's regarding the value of knowledge graphs and our role as marketing people. I want us to be braver in explaining clients that there is no one single square answer to things. And working with data is also a creative endeavor. And again, everything should come from their urge to build more relationships.
Right. In a way, a relationship, it's also providing the means for a search engine to answer to questions, which is, I think, it's pull. So if we focus on creating better data, we are able to provide more answers to the consumer without pushing the sale to the other human, the other human at the other end of the line. I think that's the idea that Teodora is explaining. Yeah, we have to be radical.
You're being polite.
I've just found the YouTube feed, and I've just realised I can do that. I hadn't noticed before, so I'm now going to show that we've got some people watching on the YouTube channel with cups of tea and saying hello. And here's a question that Andy's going to have to answer. His face is covered up, that Nick Ranger's got from Australia. Can you dynamically create new pages by means of invisible rule-based category pages? These are created based on the keywords pulled from either your search bar or what trends based in GSC data. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would ask this question to Jarno, because yes, I mean, technically that's what I'm planning to do. So we're planning to create a dynamic category of pages. We call it in WordLift. We have this research project with University of Innsbruck and other organization, and we're working on creating these dynamic pages that can go and provide information for long tail queries. So we want to be able to create these dynamic pages, and we want to be able to cluster content that fit with search demand. So once we understand a search demand, the idea of this prototype that we're creating is that we create these dynamic pages that look at what Google is presenting on its results page, look at the entity behind this results page, and then try to see in the local knowledge graph what are the most similar entities to create a collection. Okay, so we are actually doing what Nick is talking about. Will this work in SEO terms? That's for Jarno, because we haven't tested yet. I think it might, so we want to invest on it, but I don't know if it makes sense.
So yeah, Jarno, can you expand on that? Because Nick was asking the question of you, and I thought it was to Andrea.
I think what Andrea says absolutely makes sense. More generically, for an e-commerce site might be start looking at indeed your internal search data. What data do people pull in from the search bar? A little bit more effort might be also get insights into which category filters people use. So do they slice and dice for colors? Do they slice and dice for certain sizes of clothes? If you get all that information together, you actually start to see usage behavior and what people are actually looking for. I often take that information to the people who do the ads and simply ask them, are there any terms here you think you can generate good ads for that actually generate revenue? So I often take the shortcut of letting the ad people test all those variables, and those variables that actually create success on ad based will actually unlock on site and start pushing through ads immediately. And then you can build on that with an SEO strategy. But if AdWords already shows you can create ads based on certain filters, you can directly make money without doing a lot of effort. So getting that info in there, creating them dynamically, I've done so in the past as well, but that greatly demands on the type of pages that will generate automatically. I've seen it get out of control as well, where systems started to generate 20,000 plus category pages per day. Well, that's out of control. Then nobody can keep up with that, let alone create a good link graph of your site. So it depends on how out of control it might get if you do that automatically.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, I mean, things getting out of control with faceted navigation is already a big enough problem for a lot of websites. Adding this to the mix would be slightly concerning if it went. What would you call it? Went wild? No, that's not the right word.
Went out of control.
Thank you very much, Jarno. Your English is better than mine. Wonderful. I don't know where you want to take this conversation for the last 10 minutes. I mean, I don't want to bully anybody into talking about things they don't necessarily want to talk about. From an e-commerce standpoint, I mean, Nick once again is asking about ROI. I think a lot of people like Nick are faced with clients or bosses who are saying, I just want to make money. But you were saying earlier on 16% uplift in traffic and presumably sales for an e-commerce website in 2 months. And you're saying, well, that's not much. But most offline businesses would take 16% in a year.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on. I have to dig into the orders in this case to see, exactly what it means, plus 60%. But I think now it's not so difficult to prove the ROI if you are able to measure, properly things. The most complicated part is really to set, the environment in such a way that you can control the metrics and not just going after the numbers without meaning. But if you can do some basic experimenting and isolating pages where you do some experiments from pages where you do other experiments, then you come up with numbers that are quite clear in terms of what is the actual impact, how is all of these impacting on the bottom line. As we said before, I mean, here we are going to one project to another, because I mean the data is the same, and then it can bring as we say an impact on a performance of the advertisement, but it can also be good for SEO, and maybe can also help the logistic people get their stuff around at a faster pace. So there is a lot of key advantage and different type of ROIs that you want to measure. But I think now proving ROI of schema, it's pretty easy. I mean, if we compare it to, when we started, I mean, right now it's a dream, There's so many carrots that Google is throwing at us, for doing these or that, or, that rich result. I mean, the end game, we know it's not just that, right? So that's kind of the beginning of it, but it's so easy now to get, these positive ROI, if that's what you're looking for, if that's what the boss is looking for in the short term.
And moving on to kind of more philosophical point, I mean, loads of people are saying, or some people are saying, Google are throwing these carrots at us so that we will implement schema markup, so it can train its machines, and then it can drop the schema markup and get on with it itself, and it won't need it anymore. Jarno, I'm pretty sure you're going to disagree with that.
Sure, Google would love to be the Star Trek computer. Surely that's going to be their big aim at the end, but we're a long way from there yet still. Obviously, structured data in part is used to set up machine training sets, and there are areas where it's being used. But pragmatically looking, okay, Google wants to compete with Amazon, so Google needs to create a shopping environment in its organic search results. And you know what Google needs for that? Properties, types, values, to be able to create categorization, to be able to create faceted navigation. And Amazon already has that information, and Google wants to have it. So just even keeping it to something practical like that, there's a lot at stake for Google to get this right, or they'll definitely forever lose from organizations like Amazon and Alibaba.
Right, yeah, which brings a couple of points, one of which is Google's giving us the carrots. And if we take the carrots, Teodora, we're actually going to end up building our own internal knowledge graphs and making sense for ourselves within our organizations and being able to use it across the organization. And as Jarno said, save millions.
Yeah, we're going to enter the endless space of the giant global graph. No matter how small the door is, this flow will burst the door. So don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, go with the flow, as it were. Build your internal knowledge graph. And Jarno, you're suggesting that GS1 is a good way to have a focal point within the specific aspect of products to say, this is my product, it's unique, and I can build my knowledge graph with reference to GS1.
And especially if you're starting to have the need to expand the product line, your products you're selling, start looking at GS1 and the properties and values they have, because often they form a wonderful basis to start expanding your business. Then at least you have an idea what type of information you need. The biggest issue for small companies often is making sense of the gazillion different product feeds they get from manufacturers. Well, if you actually can create an organized template to merge all those feeds through that template and create your own general feed, then you already have started building a general knowledge graph. And you're still just using XML. You're parsing a bunch of different XML files, you're parsing them through some logic, and voila, you have an XML knowledge graph. That already can help a lot, because a lot of different systems eat XML. And they are still far away from the abstract worlds of RDF and OWL and triple store databases. No, simply create an XML feed and store your data in there. That already does miracles.
Right, yeah. And one question there, I mean, because with schema markup, I've started to look at schema.org and think, if somebody or a group of people have thought that attribute is sufficiently important to have in the schema vocabulary, it must therefore be more useful to the real world, to the other people, and therefore I can actually start reflecting on my own business according to what I'm seeing in schema. Andy,
yes and no, yeah,
right,
you're absolutely right, but you have to pay attention. Because you can give a volcano can have a telephone number. Right. Due to inheritance of classes, some things will have certain properties that won't make sense at all for the specific type you're looking at. But because a volcano is a subtype of a place, and places can have a telephone number, a volcano can have a telephone number as well.
Brilliant.
So when you're looking at schema.org, always make sure to be awake and realize, you ask yourself, okay, does this property make sense here for my case? But also from a schema.org perspective, don't apply everything without thought.
And what's at the top of the page is what's been created specifically for that type of entity or that attribute. And so that would be the one you would tend to look at first. And the further down the page you go on schema.org, the more general it is and possibly the less applicable it will be. Don't be naive like me and just think, oh, this is a good idea. I'll give my volcano a telephone number. I like that example. So
it's an example from the early days from schema.org.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. I thought you were being incredibly original and funny.
No. It's a documented example on numerous occasions on W3C mailing lists.
Brilliant stuff. So we're coming to the end. So can we have some closing comments? We'll start with Andrea. Closing comments on what we've gone through and what kind of your feelings are.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. We discuss why we need to focus on data quality and the webbiness. If I got it right from Teodora. So this idea that we start connecting things, and that's the way in which we create an experience. I think that's kind of, for me, the main idea is that we focus on connecting dots. That's the point.
Absolutely brilliant. I love that. Teodora, do you want to make your closing comments as though this were a court case, but it's actually a PhD meeting?
Oh, I'll try to say something profound. No, really, practically. When we think about content, let's think about data also, and let's work with people like Jarno and like Andrea, and make that marketing thing a creativity burst which doesn't have to be the cool copywriting thing you can write down, but it can also be the creative way to engage people through data.
So we can add a phone number to the volcano in the end, thanks to this creativity.
Teodora's advice is work with Jarno, work with Andrea, don't work with Jason. Jarno, can you pull me out of the fire here, please?
Jason is much more eloquent in the way he expresses things. I'll probably rub your toes in the process. So I'm a blunt guy from the Netherlands, so yeah, man. If you want somebody who is actually nice to you, call one of those three without me.
Brilliant. So concluding comment from Jarno, schema, structured data, and GS1 for products.
Don't be intimidated by the idea of building knowledge graphs. It starts with very basic steps. You can build a knowledge graph in an Excel sheet. You can build a knowledge graph in an XML feed. Just pick a point. Pick a point somewhere in your business where the biggest need for the organized data is, and start organizing that data. And once you've done that, start building on that and make sure you hook other systems into what you've built. It could be an XML file right now. Maybe it's a MySQL database in the future, and maybe it's an entire Amazon cloud for 10 years from now. You don't know. But you need to start as early as possible creating organized data, and don't build multiple data sets. Merge it all together.
Absolutely brilliant. That was genius conclusion. Thanks, everybody. I'm just going to show this, which is a special offer from WordLift e-commerce SEO.
Wow.
40% off. Get more exposure for your products on Google search. Andrea's saying it's a lot. I think it's a lot.
That hasn't been approved. This hasn't been approved. I mean, who did this, Jason?
Oops. Well, I'm not part of WordLift, so I'm allowed to offer 40% off. No, it is actually a serious offer if anyone wants to take it. Actually, Jarno, think about what you said. I mean, I've been building Kalicube Pro. I built out a relational database, which is incredibly complicated because I don't know how to do big data. And I'm beginning to think it's not a bad thing, because it really means I've had to organize everything in my own brain and not rely on a machine to do it for me. And I can actually explain my database to people, and I can find things in it, and I can dig data out that I'm quite surprised at times. And that just comes down to sitting down, or actually it comes down to waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning pretty much every night and thinking, oh, I could reorganize it like that and move that there and add this there. And it's been an incredible experience. So Kalicube Pro, incredible experience for me. Jarno, Andrea, Teodora, thank you very much. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I learned loads. And you're all delightful.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for everybody for watching. I almost forgot that part. And I just remembered it's me who ends the broadcast, and I'd forgotten that too. So, ending on the world's worst presentation person thingy in the entire universe. Goodbye. Thank you for being here.